Hello? Haha. 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 Okay, buddy, let's get to it. Maybe with a quote, okay? From the Zohar. You like the Zohar. Man was composed of two natures, the animal or lower self and the spiritual or higher self. And this is because the former is necessary to the development of the latter. So, instinct is the most basic arrangement of awareness in organisms. Life responds to stimuli, seeks substances for energy, develops and reproduces, and these actions are all supported by instinct, acting as basic vehicles of awareness. Instinct is the foundation from which every other capacity of an organism emerges. Human beings live in animal bodies that require regulation. The needs and the drives of our animal bodies are powerful and intense, particularly if you're a sexual four, rooted in our personal survival and the survival of our species. And these instincts express our vital energy, our life force, equipped with millions of years of somatic intelligence to support and make possible our survival and thriving. Because of this, our instinctual drives exert a tremendous influence on our psychology and therefore on our spiritual development. Whatever that is, with the right cultivation, they are able to support us in expanding the horizons of how we experience ourselves, how we relate to our own life force, and how we create conditions for fostering greater depths of presence and awareness. Instinct is often trivialized, right? Dismissed as simply the primitive forces and behaviors that keep us from dying. But in fact, they serve a much greater role. As neuroscientist Antonio Damasio explains, our biological systems are forces that strive for life's thriving. The innate equipment of life regulation does not aim for a neither here nor there neutral state midway between life and death. Rather, the goal of the homeostasis endeavor is to provide a better than neutral life state, what we are thinking of as maybe, affluence, a kind of affluence. And these affluent creatures identify as wellness and well-being. So, the instincts provide a foundation for life to flourish, to be enjoyed, and also to find personal meaning and fulfillment. The instincts carry deep biological wisdom of what our needs are and how to skillfully fulfill these needs while remaining adaptive and resilient. Our living is an expression of our instinctual capacities, and much of the joy of living is thanks to life actualizing itself through the instincts. These are then the cornerstones for our physical, psychological, and spiritual well-being. Instinct, however, is a slippery word, as you know, right? It can mean many different things to many different people. What is commonly referred to as an instinct runs the gamut of the most basic autonomic functions of the nervous system that sustain life on a biological level to the entire organization of our psyche and social systems. In common vernacular, instinct generally refers to autonomic functions and simple reflexes such as the glances and smiles exchanged when we're attracted to someone, and even our capacity to read, to take note of and recall the faces of other people. Other times, instinct is meant to capture our desire or our kind of knee-jerk reaction to things. In the context of the Enneagram, of which you and I are both fond and interested in, we are concerned here with how the body and psychology impact consciousness, and therefore how consciousness becomes identified with instinctual agendas. We don't become identified with pure physical appetites like hunger or lust, but we can with the motivational drive to care for our physical well-being, with the drive to elicit the sexual choice of a potential romantic partner in the game of Eros, and with the drive also to create relationships and increase our sense of belonging. The neuroscientist Donald Pfaff describes drives as having two main elements. First of all, a generalized arousal system in the brain that produces the energy and motivation to satisfy biological needs. And secondly, a specific constellation of brain systems producing the feelings and the thoughts and the behaviors associated with each particular biological need. And as we will see, my dear pole guru, this is exactly what the instincts of the Enneagram are for, right? Biological drives with specific neural networks, neurochemicals, and motivations to address specific needs. So instead of focusing here exclusively, although we will, on descriptions of behaviors and personality traits, as is often the case with, the Enneagram of personality stuff, what we're going to do here is try and understand the instinctual drives in terms of aims and energies. So aims refers to the goal of instinctual drives, which is to fulfill specific biological needs. These are motivational drives with a definite function and purpose, rather than a sort of vague catch-all term like curiosity, right? So energies refers to the specific qualities of excitation, attention, and psychological boundaries that the energy of the instinctual drive is expressed as, which we shall call from here on instinctual approaches. Okay, so these instinctual approaches support the pursuit of instinctual needs and deeply influence the texture, the shape, the boundaries of attention. Understanding instinct on these terms can perhaps help us to be less in our heads about trying to match our usually faulty self-perception with a written description and orient us instead to observe the forces of instinct in real time within us. So the needs and approaches help us to see what is actually motivating us, what needs are not being adequately addressed, and how we all unconsciously prefer and apply certain instinctual strategies while ignoring others. So this often creates a sort of imbalanced mismatch of intentions and behaviors. These distinctions can also reveal how we misread our own biological and emotional signals in a way that reinforces, very often, a negative psychological status quo. And when we view the instincts in this way, we can then understand them and recognize them in ourselves with greater nuance and specificity. Instinctual needs and instinctual drives. Okay, let's talk about those. So, each instinctual drive exists to address specific needs grounded in biology, and these needs are more than just basic survival maintenance. They speak, we could say, to a kind of quality of physical, emotional, and psychological well-being that is necessary, discuss, for a satisfying and well-rounded life. Maslow, okay? Maslow is probably best known for his creation of that hierarchical map of human needs, from basic survival and maintenance of our organism, self-praise, right, to satisfying conditions that support the actualization of an individual's potential, which I think is moving more into sexual and social. So the map of needs he created was a pyramidal diagram, as you know, that ranged from basic physiological needs, such as the need for water or to expel bodily waste, to needs for actualization, increased consciousness. And while some dispute how accurate and scientific this model is, it nonetheless has a certain kind of value, right? Maslow's model at the time went against American cultural narratives, which are generally disdainful of our needs and of an expression of need, as well as the state of psychology, where the emphasis was on psychological dysfunction, autism, the beeps, etc. Maslow's real contribution was recognizing and articulating that there is no clear universal baseline of what basic needs are. Needs are varied, they are dynamic, and they are dependent upon where we are. What do I have here? I have a need for some tea, my friend. Hang on. You have a need for some tea too.
If I could fuck a mountain, Lord, I would fuck a mountain, and I'd do it with a woman in the valley. If she lives in the valley, oh, if she lives in the valley, oh, the mighty, mighty valley.
Maslow was also able to intelligently articulate how basic needs manifest at different levels of development. And that even at higher levels of development, basic needs are still very much present, right? The instincts are still present even when we're in the ego cage. So how needs are managed at one level differs greatly from how they're addressed at more basic levels. What we can draw from Maslow is the understanding of how central a solid foundation in the well-regulated body, in instincts, and the personality is for the development of whatever we're going to call, I don't know, the good stuff, right? True consciousness. The instinctual needs are the primary motivations for our behavior and the major force behind our personality types. And since our habitual state of awareness is quite limited, we're all asleep, as Gurdjieff would say, most of the time, we have incorrect assumptions about what is motivating us and others. The instinctual needs then help provide a first step in penetrating a layer of our psychological onion by getting underneath our beliefs about what's driving us, which is vital for this kind of being alive, what a day's for process. So having an objective view of our real physiological and emotional needs also helps us, you could say, to take better care of ourselves. But more importantly, it helps us to be real with ourselves. And us sexy fours love that, right? It's crucial to understand that a great deal of the human struggle to meet basic needs and much of the suffering that results is due to environmental factors, political, economic, social, climate, we're in the middle of a drought, abusive relationships, degrading work, or dangerous living situations. And this should not, of course, be overlooked or ignored, but each instinctual drive within us, right, apart from the external circumstances, each instinctual drive is also a motivation to fulfill 3 basic biological and emotional needs, making for a total, if you like, of 9 needs. And it is coincidental, perhaps, that these numbers match with the points on the Enneagram, although there seems to be nothing random necessarily about the triadic pattern that emerges from everything based in this realm. The needs of the instinctual drive are, as you know, self-preservation needs, physical well-being, the need to care for the body, attending to matters of health, safety, comfort, resources, right? Money, sustainable self-regulation, the need to cultivate skills, capacities necessary for independent self-regulation and resiliency in the face of challenges, the need to strike a dynamic equilibrium, to find a balance between activity and rest, adaptability and durability, and to feel our own autonomy and competence. That is self-pres, okay? Also, as I said, the need to have resources, to have assets available for our physical well-being. Elon Musk, he's pretty self-pres, isn't he? Our foundations, home, work, family, are resources. They provide a basic sense of orientation. Foundations serve as touchstones around which our lives are organized, and usually these are an expression of our values. Included here is our lifestyle, the sensibility of informing the rhythms of our daily living. Okay, my favorite category, sexual. So what is sex? Well, it's sex, the need to elicit sexual choice of a partner, of mates, sexual contact, sexual release, also chemistry, the need to seek and find complementary energies by making YouTube videos and hoping people come and like and subscribe. A need to feel chosen. That's important. A need to feel chosen. Chemistry is also how we create Ars Nova, right? It's the means by which we sense creative possibilities and enlivening influences. Also, loss of self, I guess that's the spiritual angle. Going beyond ourselves and our usual psychological boundaries, a sort of temporary dissolution of the habitual experience of selfhood as a kind of self-renewal. Ars Nova, Ars Nova, Ars Nova. Social, okay. Relatedness, relationships, maintaining close emotional contact with others, friends, partners, family. This is our need for emotional intimacy, for giving, for receiving attention and care. Belonging, right? The need to feel belonging with someone or something, to feel we matter and are part of something greater than ourselves. YouTube is a very social place. Another way of expressing this need is as a need for community, collaboration, and for a sense of place and support. We can also think about, contextual or vocational elements here. The need to interpret boundaries, expectations, structures of interpersonal dynamics. This recognition further motivates us to participate in the lives of others beyond our self-interested pursuits and to understand our part in a greater whole. When someone in Hinge says, you need to think of something beyond yourself, they're probably talking social. And this may manifest as the need to give or serve others, to create meaning for oneself and others, and to share one's gifts and vocation. The impact that having our needs met has on our felt sense of well-being and wholeness is hard to measure, although you feel it, right? But the experience of it, the experience of relief and pleasure when all of those needs are met is fundamental. When a need is met, whether it's physical, emotional, or this sort of cascade of hormones and neurotransmitters that are released to regulate and restore our nervous systems, it feels good. As physical and psychological health and well-being improves, we then relax, happiness increases, compulsions decrease, distress lessens, and we can hopefully then step outside of the ego cage of all of those emotional patterns that make us suffer and are often a reaction to an unregulated body, which is why the Tamesians have the breathing practice and other practices, right? An inability to meet one's basic needs, on the other hand, any of those three, leads, of course, to intense distress and psychological imbalance. So recognizing what needs require attending to versus what needs our ego wants to overindulge or ignore, right? That's the personality, that's the ego cage, has to begin with presence in the body. Taking care of our needs then lessens the volume of unconscious associations and reactions of anxiety and distress, and we have to start in the body. Because all the shit in the mind and the heart, right, all the shit in the personality, essentially, including its fears and its narcissism, can hopefully be rendered more transparent, more flexible and strong instead of fragile and rigid as they often are. We can have more inner resources, more energy for dealing with life and for relating with others, and more importantly, more energy and more force behind our attention for our presence and for playing the game, So these drives are our life force. They're allowed to operate unobstructed from the interference of outdated psychological content. They seek and foster conditions that literally make us more alive. If we are truly following the energy of these instincts, they imbue us with nourishment and meaning. And when our instincts are in a natural alignment of service to our welfare, to our health, to our vitality and psychological well-being, then you could say we begin to flourish. The core of the personality is the struggle of how we meet our basic needs. Right? Personality is about what motivates us. And this has a variety of implications that underscore the value and centrality of instincts, right? Because instincts go under the ego cage, if you like. Instincts hold up the ego cage. Yeah, which is why I like to call it a cage, because it is. It's a structure, right? The personality is a structure that we invest all of this pride and energy in, as a psychological tool for meeting our needs. It works in a similar way. It's not, however, a viable source of identity. It works in a similar way. So while we may not always be, thinking about or taking direct action to meet our appetites and desires, although we often are, all of the products of our personality that we're usually typically quite proud of, including, our deep thoughts, our emotions, our creativity, our talents, are often features that we have adapted that directly or indirectly support meeting one or more of the needs, also of the instinctual needs, right? As will hopefully become clearer as we continue with our book club. So this realization could bring us, hopefully, into some humility, some curiosity to reconsider where do our attachments lie. Also, this could mean that there is a relationship between our capacity to self-regulate and the quality of our consciousness. One characteristic of the ego is ignorance about what the body actually needs due to its state of general physical dissociation. So when I'm being a SAT-SAC 4, I don't think that I need yoga and cold plunges and playing my ukulele, but I probably do. The ego understands what is required to reinforce identification with itself, right? With the sad sack sexy 4. But this means that our mental and emotional cravings are often completely out of sync with our body's real needs. And there is often a great disparity, as you and I know, right, between the body's needs and what the ego craves or thinks it needs. For example, our body may need a certain amount of exercise, a certain kind of nutritional balance. But for the ego, right, being comfortable all the time, eating comfort food, may make us feel like we need that, may make us feel, like well-being on an emotional level. But for the ego, maybe being comfortable, not being in any form of distress or any form of even physical discomfort, drives us, if you like, to laze around and be a slob. And so it's almost a guarantee then that we will relate to all of the 9 instinctual needs more from emotional associations attached to them instead of the body's own sensation-based feedback and intelligence. When the ego's desires overrides the body's well-being, this creates problems for us. Physically and psychologically, it means that our nervous systems stay chronically dysregulated and our bodies become locked into patterns of stress and tension that feel normal to the ego, but are not to someone else. One reason that stillness, then, is such an important factor in spiritual practices is because it's very, very difficult to refine the sensitivity and clarity of our consciousness when our nervous system is bound up in tension, emotional reaction, and chronic thoughts from its distress. So the game that a lot of the spiritual people play, right, is we start to learn through physical sensation to be sensitive to our actual present state instead of all the ideas of the ego, the concepts, the stories about what we need. We start to bridge this disparity by learning to consciously self-regulate, however it is you do it. I mean, but playing the ukulele, writing poems, whatever the fuck you need to do. As needy humans, we are, of course, also dependent on forces outside ourselves. Even if we grow our own food, we are still dependent on the conditions that make growing and preparing food possible. When we are born, we were entirely reliant on our parents, and gradually nature and whatever caregivers were around directed us to being able to meet our own needs with greater skillfulness and efficiency. However, this dependency on external resources is and continues to be a source of great vulnerability and fear that are also bound up within the instincts and at the core of personality. Will the things we need always be there for us? Will people still want to give me their care and attention when they find out that I'm a crazy sexual 4? Most human activity is based on doing things that we think will keep instinctual resources, the objects, the circumstances, the people we depend on to regulate us and meet our physical and emotional needs, accessible to us. Particularly we got WhatsApp, right? Oh, you're accessible to me now. On the other hand, it is important for people to feel that they are also autonomous and can meet their own needs. Therefore, the central conflict, you could say, of the personality is between one's desire to feel autonomous and one's dependency on externals for necessities. The fourth implication brings the Enneagram into the mix, right? That is, because we often mistakenly take our identity to be rooted in the personality, we often also end up projecting the qualities of essence at the core of our Enneagram type, so for me it would be depth, onto instinctual resources. It's like we hold a dim memory of essence, but instead of seeking it directly, it's as if we're trying to evoke the feeling of essence, right, through the instinctual needs. Most human obsession with attention and sex and wealth boils down to unconsciously viewing instinctual resources as keys to actualizing the essential self. The ego believes it will self-actualize by, for example, obtaining a desired lifestyle, a sexual partner, or the esteem or status that we crave. When instincts and Enneagram types are taken together, then we gain this very clear picture of the crux of our personal and specific patterns of how essence, depth, love, harmony, integrity, etc., is forgotten, and how consciousness becomes enmeshed in the instinct, how the instinct enters the ego cage, if you like. So, with this in mind, let's take a closer look at the role that these drives play in maintaining our bodies and in our psychological makeup. Okay, back to self-pres. So, simply put, the self-preservation instinct is the drive for well-being, right? It's the drive to survive and to work in support of what makes us thrive in both the short and the long term. As our basic drive of survival, it supplies energy to endure in the face of existential challenges. It is, you could say, the most compelling, the most powerful drive, and it is shared by all forms of life from which the other drives and the functions and capacities of our organism flower. So if we think of life and survival in terms of, very strict sort of binary categories, like, alive, dead, surviving, dying, then we can often fail to understand something quite fundamental to life, namely that it is better understood as a kind of range of energies and vitalities rather than as static states in opposition to death. We're bringing in the Tao here, okay? So to be connected with the self-preservation instincts means we directly sense and experience that we are living and growing, that we are constantly in development or decline. The self-preservation instinct is aliveness itself, and therefore our relationship to this instinct reflects our feelings about being alive. How closely we keep to the visceral, moment-by-moment sense of the energies of the body, especially sensation, is a measure of how present and willing we are to make intentional use of our limited time on Earth. What are days for? What are days for? What are days for, Paul? The self-preservation instinct maintains, you could say, or it's designed to maintain, a kind of healthy awareness of death, a source of strength that then urges us on to use our time wisely and fully, to be intentional with how we live and where we invest energy. So what might it mean about the value we place in our life if our breath, for example, is routinely poor and shallow? What does it reveal if our bodies are often numb or simply being used like a sort of an object, being driven around in a car to get us from point A to B? The self-preservation instinct continuously monitors and gauges the immediate physical state of the organism. It is sensitive to the body's direct feedback, providing discernment for what conditions encourage growth and well-being. So listening to this instinct means living in accordance with the body's real state and its real needs rather than all of this and all of this, okay? It means following the unfolding of our life's energy. This is the drive that motivates us to also test and express our physical capacities and our aggression, but also to rest and foster the conditions that support the optimization of our quality of life force. Self-preservation extends its and also I, to include the overall shape of our lifestyle and a schematic overview of how life is lived, how much our style of living is a reflection of and foundation for the things that matter to us. And when we are in touch with this instinct, we see how our lifestyle is a reflection of our conscious and unconscious values. Seeing the patterns we live within shines a lot of light, a lot of light, on the unconscious assumptions and psychological forces motivating us, all the head stuff and all the heart stuff that we may not have a great deal of awareness of. And very often the way we actually live, you could say, stands in contradiction to what we think we value capture. We might, for example, believe we cherish presence while spending most of our time, on kind of mental autopilot on fucking Instagram. If that's how our time is used, then what do we truly value? What we spend our time and attention on, Polgu, expresses what we truly value versus what we want to believe is important for us. So the where are you, Polgu? The awake, if you like, the awake self-preservation instinct invites us to look at discrepancies between what we believe versus how we're really behaving and impacting others, right? Practically speaking, this means valuing our lives and bodies such that we make sure to treat them well, to build on and exercise our capacities, to breathe fully, to sing, to chant, to say no to things that are toxic to us. We're not so good at that, yeah? Ethanol. And to take care of our basic needs in a balanced way. Like, not overeating, over-exercising. And this includes how we make use of our life, even in the in-between moments, the times when nothing is required of us. It is this off time, right? If it is spent in, distraction, self-numbing and wasted moments, is our off time, Polgu, spent in distraction and self-numbing and wasted moments? Probably. Or are we actually letting ourselves rest with intention and not use time, as another opportunity to check out? Is the way we live guided by waiting for the next thing to grip our attention, or by intention? Intention. I mean, both probably, right? How do we make use of what we have? Time, resources, our physical capacities. A major self-preservation concern is our quality of life, both materially and emotionally, and how it is optimized. It brings awareness to how our life is structured, including how we materially support ourselves through each progressive step, challenge, and setback. So this instinct's focus extends to cultivating the conditions in life that allow us to not only live in a way that feels good, but can also help us to develop something meaningful, intentional. It encourages us to be economical about where and how our energy is invested, not out of fear of waste or effort, but from choice, from purpose. It provides the energy and discipline to, get a job, start a business, get us into the gym on a regular basis, develop certain skills, begin to build for the future from the present, blah, 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 all that boring good stuff. Adaptability is, of course, here a key aspect, right, of healthy self-pres. Any system that's too fixed, that's too rigid, is susceptible to collapse under strain. So if our lives are too rigidly limited within habitual patterns, as soon as we find ourselves outside familiar conditions, we could face a neurotic breakdown, or find that our bodies are lacking the physical capacity to handle challenging circumstances. Likewise, a system that's too languid has no resiliency. If we're physically attacked, for example, it does no good to freeze. If you receive a punch when you're rigid, it will incur far greater damage than if you are able to be flexible and move with it, go with the flow, etc. Being grounded in the body and in touch with the sensations of self-preservation means that you'll be able to stand your ground, process your reactions, defend yourself effectively, and endure, literally, whatever literal or metaphorical shit storm is on its way to meet you. Inner life also requires a solid foundation in a well-regulated and conscious self-preservation instinct. Take, for example, authentic self-awareness. Authentic self-awareness begins with seeing how we are really living, how we are really treating ourselves, and whether there is enough congruence between our body, heart, and mind, so that how we express ourselves in the choices we make are hopefully somewhat in accord with what will make our life a fertile soil for essence to thrive. So self-pres supports us in consciously self-regulating and also in being intentional towards valuing our present state. What are days for? The awake self-preservation instinct helps us to live and to create the external conditions that help us to thrive, or at least help presence to thrive. How we nourish, support, and grow our soul in the same way we attend to the body is what the mature self-preservation instinct, you could say, calls upon us to manifest. This deep well of resilience, fortitude, sensitivity to our present state is the root system that deepens in direct proportion to the capacity to reach those higher realms. Okay, let's talk about the batteries that mainly drive idiot Steve. The sexual instinct. This instinct is the drive to put ourselves ahead of sexual competition. People like Oliver and his houseboat. The striving of life to reconstitute itself into ever more diverse and creative forms, subjecting each organism to intense pressure to prove its genetic merit. And to that end, nature, of course, has devised a vast range of displays and ornamentations to advertise sexual congruity, including this. Yes, this YouTube. This is all SX social. Organisms invest an enormous proportion of activity and energy in eliciting the attention and attraction of a potential mate. Like and subscribe, potential mate. All the bright feathers, all the deafening calls, all the frenetic dances, and other totally impractical investments of energy seen in animals are for a sexual goal. This instinct discerns who or what we are attracted to and provides the motivation to pursue it, to enhance and display characteristics that make us, hopefully, more enticing than the other 20 million YouTubers out there. So this instinct is how we signal our sexuality. Just as self-preservation is not the appetite of hunger, but a drive to ensure that appetites can be met, this drive is not, it really isn't, folks, it's not sexual lust or genital arousal. The sexual instinct's aim is not in acquiring a large number of sexual partners or having the most sex. I haven't had sex for 5 years, okay? I am sexually dominant. How do you explain that? No, it's about cultivating fascination and attraction to hook interested and willing sexual partners. This understanding of sexual instinct, of course, will challenge some of the cultural narratives around human courtship and mating strategies because it reveals the role and function of sexuality in human beings apart from procreation or bonding and all that other eros bullshit. So having evolved in conditions prior to modern culture and economic forces, the way this drive functions sometimes runs up against strategies that modern people employ to garner attraction, such as, high status, wealth, and of course, good old romance. The sexual instinct seeks sexual partners with whom we share suitably strong chemistry to bring us to a state of sufficient excitation for full surrender during the sexual act in what Wilhelm Reich called, orgiastic potency. Quote, orgiastic potency is the capacity to surrender to the flow of biological energy, free of any inhibitions, the capacity to discharge completely the dammed up sexual excitation through involuntary, pleasurable convulsions of the body. And that's how I make content too. The sexual discharge and renewal of the nervous system is mirrored psychologically as a drive to temporarily relinquish tightly held and psychological boundaries and release our habitual hold on ourselves in a way that regulates nervous system and counters psychological stagnancy. Because psychological stagnancy sucks, Polgu, it sucks. So obviously there's a boring side to that, right? Genetic recombination, that's the sexual procreation side. And sexuality has a parallel function on a psychological level, right? Ars nova, by also pursuing people and influences that have the potential to revise our sense of self, to upend stagnation physically and psychologically. Attraction, therefore, has greater utility than procreation alone. For our ancestors, sexual relationships were not just one-night stands, right? Nor were they lifelong monogamous bonds. Instead, prehistoric humans, along with many indigenous populations today, had, you'll be pleased to hear this, multiple polyfidelitous sexual relationships that required ongoing renewal of interests. So there was a great motivation to be ongoingly self-reinventing in order to maintain the interests of potential mates, right? Like on here, like on YouTube. It's like, hey, potential mates, look at me. So in prehistory, before we could, pay for entertainment, right? We had to be the entertainment if we hope to gain and retain a partner's attraction. As with any sexual animal, this circumstance produces as you would imagine, a variety of behaviors to distinguish oneself from the sexual competition. And in humans, this happens by emphasizing things like beauty, virility, and imparting, shall we say, a distinct impression. It also provides the motivation to invest energy into creative activities, talents, other expressions of virtuosity that unconsciously function as courtship displays, right? Indicators of reproductive fitness. My whole freaking channel is an attempt at that, but it's the usual, crackpot attempt. From an evolutionary point of view, the human mind is as much a sexual ornamentation as a problem solver, right? If you've been deeply attracted to someone, Polgu, you know this, it's not just their body you're interested in, it's their personality, especially their inner world as it is expressed through humor and insightfulness and talents. All sexual animals have ways of advertising themselves, humans included. And in order to capture the attention of those that we want to attract, we must distinguish ourselves physically and psychologically. Remaining neutral is not a particularly successful strategy on Hinge or anywhere else. So this instinct motivates us, clearly, to make ourselves dynamic in some way, enticing in some way, by developing and expressing our unique flavor. And this can range in meaning from, the superficial, getting nice abs or, lip injections, to something more real, coming closer to expressing our individual talents and gifts and qualities. Bring out the ukulele. To keep attraction alive, one has to be willing, you could say, to break out of habitual roles and personas and find personal and interpersonal edges and edginess, which is why I'm a fucking snowflake edgelord. For this, the sexual instinct motivates us to invest energy in ourselves, our passions, our interests, our self-expression, our YouTube channel. And these attraction displays, along with our physical appearance, are, you could say, akin to the peacock's tail in advertising our health, our magnetism, our creativity, all of that. Therefore, the motivating force to experience interpersonal chemistry is, you could say, stronger and more emotionally charged, I would say, absolutely, than the need for sex itself. Fuck sex. I don't need that. Just let me fuse. Just let me fuse with the fucking universe, Polgu. Sure. Chemistry and activation are the tools that drive us to discern who and what we're attracted to and repelled by. But chemistry itself, I don't know. It's mysterious, right? But it is distinct, and it is a very familiar sensation that denotes natural excitation and energetic syntony between people that suggests through the body and corresponding polarities with a creative or enlivening potential that this is what it's about. It may also indicate sexual attraction or attraction of another kind. We can experience many, many different kinds of chemistry with many, many different entities, including plants and trees and pigs and all the rest of it. We don't want to have sex with everyone. We don't feel this energy with everyone, but it is a means for recognizing creative potential of some sort. For this reason, the sexual instinct is attuned to and organized around patterns and pathways of excitation and physiological as well as psychological arousal, right? It's going for that charge. What begins as tracking extends to a sensitivity to what arouses energy when this instinct is engaged. The sexual instinct isn't just an active yang energy. It also has a very strong yin component, an impulse to surrender, to lose oneself, and to drop one's boundaries and defenses all at once. This impulse has often been mistaken as a kind of a spiritual drive, right? As the ego, as we know, is prone to misinterpret. But if utilized with presence, it can indeed serve an authentic willingness to transform. Somewhat counterintuitively, as much as the sexual instinct wants to dissolve boundaries, some degree of separation is desirable so as to have something to push against, which of course generates excitement. So even if merging is achieved, it's not really the romance drive, right? More like sort of coupled, well, it's a bit of that, but coupled with the drive to separate once again so as to re-engage the intensity and the boundary crossing. The sexual instinct acts as a counter to the stability-seeking property of self-preservation and also the discretion of the social instinct, in that it is aiming to be undone by our experience and provides therefore the thrust to overcoming any obstacle between ourselves and the object of desire. Look at Glenn Hansard. sexual first. That man, he wants to be undone, and he was. The sexual instinct wants to be met by an experience or person in such a way that there is a reconstitution of one's habitual feelings of identity, to throw off one's persona or usual limitations. In addressing, say, the erotic imagery of the sun temples of Konarak and the Khajuraho, India, in his, essay, The Erotic Spirituality, Alan Watts says something like this. He says, sexual instinct, he refers to it as ecstasy, and he says it's hardly recognized that ecstasy is, in fact, a basic human need, just as much as vitamins and proper nutrition, and that when its positive and life-sustaining forms are repressed, it is inevitably sought in violence and cruelty. For ecstasy, which is beyond pleasure and is always seasoned by a little soupçon, a little touch of pain, may be approached by the right-hand path of love and the left-hand path of hate, the way dexterous and the way sinister. In its many forms and moods, ecstasy is, I certainly believe that, life itself. The very word ekstasis means to stand outside, to be liberated from the bondages of oneself, the bondages of the ego cage, the conceptual ego, personality, and the role player that one is supposed to be. In ecstasy, one is no longer an object, a thing or a being that can be rejected or fucked around with, alone and separate from the total energy of the world. The ecstatic is beyond the pale of a classified, name-formed, and regimented society where everyone must identify themselves with a fixed role. Fuck that. Yet, as Watts makes clear, an unhealthy relationship to the sexual instinct can also mean, harmfully acting out. Sure, the sexual instinct has, creative as well as destructive polarities, in that it can lead to literal or creative conception, and it can connect us to new impressions as well as knock out habits and barriers. But without presence, it can also lead us to a compulsive seeking to expel or discharge or, spend our life forces in ways that can be reckless and self-destructive. And because of this, compulsory and polarizing quality, it can be very, very destabilizing from the perspective of other instincts. Without the grounding of self-preservation, I'm very lucky that I have sexual self-praise. Self-praise is second. And the contextual awareness of the social instinct, which you give me in spades, Polgu, it can render us completely unconcerned with consequences. The sexual instinct brings up a great deal of fear, of discomfort, because it is unpredictable. We can't choose who we'll be attracted to or for how long, and nor can we control whether anyone will remain attracted to us, which is a swine. No one can know if a sudden attraction or lack thereof will upend all of our projects, all of our goals and attachments in an instant. Midsummer love madness, Polgu. Midsummer love madness. Attraction and chemistry play themselves out automatically. We have no say in them, and they do not care. They do not give a fuck if we undermine our support systems or our relationships. They have this weird, mysterious logic all to themselves. When this drive is integrated, not only are we really going for what enlivens and arouses us, not just fucking people on houseboats, we're also investing in ourselves. It helps us to individuate, to develop and express ourselves. And it's a way that we then can uncover what expands our felt sense of aliveness. It's how we shed our skin. It's how we allow ourselves to be renewed and reinvented and to keep moving towards a deeper source in ourselves with a willingness to let go of what no longer serves us. The sexual instinct, then, you could say, points to the need to transfigure ourselves and to move towards people and energies and influences that can best serve this purpose. Like, the reliable metaphor of the salmon swimming upstream to spawn and die, there is a strong element here of risking a loss of one's intactness or physical or psychological safety for some kind of enlivening consummation. The sexual instinct in everyone is the part that is willing, essentially, to risk losing everything in pursuit of what's vitalizing and what is life-affirming. And that is wonderful, but also, I really wish it wasn't my first and dominant instinct. What I do truly wish, is my first and dominant rather than my last instinct pole, is the social. It's your first instinct, right? If the self-preservation instinct constitutes our fundamental aliveness, and the sexual instinct unveils new dynamic and creative expressions of that aliveness, then the social drive, your dominant instinct, opens us to a new order of what living means. Intention, intention, intention. One in which our experience is embedded within a vast ecosystem of interrelated living things. This vast panpsychic entity, manifestation, right? And that's because the social instinct, and I have it too, my friend, I do, just not enough of it, motivates us to create relationships and care for the well-being of others. It is our desire to bond, to belong, to positively enhance the lives of those we care for. The social drive is ongoingly impacted, shaped, and finds orientation through a wide tapestry of impressions that provide a window into other people's intentions and feelings and identities for a complex, multifaceted view of the human mosaic. It not only drives us to be proactive in forming and preserving relationships, but it instills a strong need for meaning that stems from finding a sense of purpose or vocation or service in relation to others. The social instinct invites us to consider who and what we really care about and what gives us purpose beyond self-interest. The need for purpose is one of the central longings for fulfilling human life. Something special happens when our personal experience is entwined with and of benefit to others in service of an authentic aim that extends beyond personal concerns, which is also why I'm sitting here, speaking to YouTube today. This feels social. It's not really sexual. It's not really self-praise. Of course, I'm lying to myself. It's totally sexual. It's totally sexual. So the social instinct speaks to something intrinsic yet often overlooked in our view of human nature, our interdependence, biologically, psychologically, spiritually. When I fail to live this truth, I suffer greatly, and it diminishes my sense of what life can mean. The social instinct is the newest instinctual drive in organisms, right? It emerged only really 10 million years ago or so, In this way, it represents a real revolution in how life self-organizes, encouraging acts of sacrifice that often go against individual survival interests, right, for the sake of other members of the group. The sexual instinct doesn't do that. The sexual instinct goes in where the sexual instinct goes to mate with a new partner and kills that new partner's children. Let's just remind ourselves, that's what the sexual instinct does in the animal kingdom. And the self-preservation instinct sometimes eats those children. Sometimes the mother will eat her own children. That's what the self-preservation instinct does in the animal kingdom. And we are, of course, the animal kingdom, let us not forget. So the origin of the social instinct in mammals is in the bond, I think it's fair to say, right, that object-relational bond between a mother and a child. To be able to read, to attune to another's experience, needs, and intentions is so important for negotiating survival within a group. But an even more basic principle for mammalian life is that offspring must matter to their parents. They didn't to mine, well, not to my father's anyway, but they really should. They really must in some way. Otherwise, maybe our social instinct doesn't get developed. I don't know. Discuss. We'll talk about this in the book club. Organisms of a certain complexity require care and learning outside the womb. This necessitates the valuation of the life of another being to such a degree that one animal, the caregiver, is very often self-sacrificing. You are, certainly, for the benefit of another. Human babies are born with their physiological and autonomic functions as a work in progress. And compared to other animals, they require a great deal more care and support from others. Our physiology is radically oriented to relationships. It's not just that an infant needs its mother. The nervous system of adults are empathetically attuned to their children through this capacity for deep affinity and nonverbal connection, wherein mother and child share in the same subjective feelings and physical states with amazing precision. The inner states of other humans have goes without saying, a powerful impact on our own states, even influencing our own experience of ourselves. The state of synchronization and connection shared by mother and child becomes, then you could say, a kind of prototype for all other forms of personal contact. Human beings are, as we know, one of the most relational creatures on Earth. Our survival and development is utterly dependent upon our being in relationships, even if it's a relationship with a garden pig. The social instinct instills, right, the capacity to experience a sense of relatedness beyond genetic and tribal concerns, to recognize an intrinsic interconnectedness often far better than our conscious minds do. On a biological level, humans are astonishingly oriented to other people for a basic sense of well-being relative to other species, co-regulating each other's nervous systems simply by our presence, which hopefully means that GPT will not put me out of business just by doing my yakety yak, that my actual presence, my actual sitting there with another person, drinking tea, listening to them, their emotions eliciting expressions on my face, etc., that is hopefully, dear God, still going to be of use to the human race in 5 years' time. Many of the features that we consider to be uniquely human, like, personality, existential awareness, you could say are really just a result of this very complex social nature. Our psychologically based self-concepts often arise through relationship with our earliest caregivers, constituting a kind of psychological birth after our physical birth. So relatedness then, right, you could say is the basis for our experience of identity and self-image. This makes us aware that other people likewise have complex subjectivities of their own. Our relational intelligence, like all our instinctual capacities, can and should adapt. Instinctual systems are undergoing constant revision processes through experiences and interaction with the environment, and the relational instincts in particular are sensitive and responsive to our overall state of relaxation and intention, right? So when this drive is active in us, we are interested and curious about people beyond what they can be or do for us. We can view them as whole, three-dimensional individuals with feelings, desires, and needs of their own, and we are much better at recognizing their independent yet interdependent existence and the value of their personal experience. In the recognition of how integral relationships are for living a meaningful life, the social instinct imbues a desire in us, you could say, to live and act in concert with others. Having something of value to offer others provides a sense of purpose. Therefore, our social instinct is maybe seeking a way to not only be impacted and fed through contact with others, right, through consuming the content of others, but also to offer up something of our own, like this. Vocation, purpose, and meaning are major themes for a vibrant social instinct and a fulfilling life. The instincts express themselves in different styles of attention and psychological boundaries, in support of moving towards resources or people that are in our field of awareness. In contrast to the other two instincts, the boundary style of the social instinct is pretty flexible, pretty poly, and adaptable, right? Our social lens can be adjusted to include many people, or it can narrow our focus in one-on-one interactions, adjust our engagement style to appropriately match our context. Social adaptability means that this instinct is sensitive and receptive to other people's states. Any sort of engagement we enter into requires that we pick up on a wide range of verbal and non-verbal cues. It helps us to read the appropriate roles and interpret interpersonal dynamics, to know how to speak to our, doctor versus how to speak to our lover, for example. The social instinct's capacity for openness and discernment attunes us to the inner state of another person, to know how to interpret and read their intentions, empathize, and interpret their external place within a sort of a map of the social milieu, and also how to relate and communicate with them. If the sexual instinct discriminates based on chemistry, the social instinct discriminates based on affinity. So you, my friend, are basically affinity plus chemistry, and I am affinity plus resources. The social instinct is sensitive to what the social instinct is sensitive to what foundations make for the basis of any kind of relatedness. From a place of holding, what's in common, right? Differences can then be understood, differences can be appreciated. The discriminating social drive makes us selective about who we let in and to what degree, which is also why I think, we're all fucked if we do our social stuff on screen, because you're not really going to be able to do that in the way it was designed for. The social drive wants us to find and connect with interesting, exciting, like-minded people and keep away from those who are, boring and draining and incompatible. It helps us to assess who is or isn't a worthy friend or ally or partner without losing sight of the humanity of those with whom we disagree with or face conflict. The social instinct then generates an interest in differences in people, but it can also be susceptible to fear and suspicion when people and groups fall far outside the bounds of our inner social compass. Thus, the maturation of the social instinct means evolving what one takes to be a shared basis for empathy, perhaps, is a word, expanding from a small set of external common traits and signifiers, people who look and act like me, to a much deeper sense of recognizing our shared capacity to experience, to suffer, to enjoy, while also acknowledging, vast differences. So this means that the social instinct grows, you could say, our capacity to hold greater nuance, greater sort of multi-leveled understandings of identity. The differences and unique features then aren't lost or overlooked, as they sometimes are in the sexual or self-pres instinct, but held in conjunction with this deeper interpersonal understanding. Intention. From the point of view of the social instinct, we seek then to represent ourselves in appearance, personal style, body language, in a way that is congruent with our sense of social identity, which means that social signaling is a major facet of this instinctual drive. It makes us aware that our behaviors and appearance communicate something about who we are, and is also a means by which we can gain others' attention and interest, which sounds a little bit like the sexual instinct, doesn't it? But it's not. We all want to be known and understood, and we want others to have some interest in us and care for us. Many social animals signal by broadcasting their dominance or place within a social network. YouTube, again, very social, very, very social, very sexual, not very self-pres. Humans do this too, but most of us live within an extremely intricate web of subgroups, cultures, affiliations, and therefore we draw from a much wider palette of cultural signs and symbols and hierarchies than most animals. The social instinct, we could then say, gives attention to how we communicate who we are and how we locate ourselves within a larger context. The healthy social instinct is very skillful. You, Polku, are very skillful in knowing what face to present to people and how to manage your, interpersonal identities. This instinct helps you, right, to recognize that authenticity isn't clinging to a consistent self-presentation, but rather understanding how to skillfully hold multiple facets of self without becoming lost in any of them. In modern life, opportunities to directly experience ourselves integrated within an interpersonal fabric are quite often rare and fleeting. While modern life can be, fragmented and complex, when we are able to put, you could say, our self-involvement aside and serve this sort of common aim, right, public service announcement, the results can often be pretty cool. Every culture has its unique communal rituals and practices that not only bring a sense of identity, but also make space for another level of extra-personal awareness, born from the alignment of many wills working together. Our longing for such cohesion often turns towards its opposite, right? Anger and resentment towards those people who are mistakenly perceived as representing obstacles to realizing this interpersonal unity. I mean, I think this is what pluribus is about as well, right? The social instinct is the source of our greatest challenge as a species because, as fruitful as connection and collaboration can be, relatedness is also, as we know, the cause of, all of our strife. Our psychological issues, experience of identity arise through it, and also therefore triggered by relationships, this ongoing tension, right, in balancing the individual's needs, the needs of the collective, and the needs of competing groups. A sort of heartbreak around the loss of cohesion can become antagonism towards outside or impure elements, making us revert to more crude and extreme social, political, and religious ideologies to compensate. And what this means for the present situation is that solidarity doesn't really happen mechanically or by accident. Any realized sense of belonging and community requires, we might say, conscious intention. True autonomy and freedom is not how the ego imagines it, as complete independence and self-determination. This is the view of our inner infant working out autonomy issues with their mother. Our bodies are subject to organic laws, and likewise, our interpersonal life is beholden to considerations of what it means to coexist with other people. I hear you saying this to me, Polku, all the time. I know, Polku. Authentic freedom lies in being able to choose what conditions to subject oneself to and what we decide to serve. As good old Karl Marx said, only in community with others does each individual have the means of cultivating their gifts in all directions. Only in community, therefore, is personal freedom possible. I wonder what you think of that. So then the awake or the integrated, I would prefer integrated social instinct, isn't replacing I with we, but instead living from a place in which our action and inaction have meaning for a larger reality than our own immediate concerns. So from this point of view, we could live, as I often do, a hermit's life, and yet still be living in a kind of mature social drive when we come to recognize that selfhood isn't fixed or separate, but emerges from the interaction of interpersonal and intrapersonal forces. The immediacy of the alive social instinct brings us into true relationships where we not only experience nourishment in contributing our value and care, but we also feel this sort of larger presence that we are inextricably a part of as well. As I felt watching Glenn Hansard's funeral the other day, I felt I was there, I felt I was part of it, right? Instinct, we might say, has a kind of automatic character to it, right? We don't make any choices in terms of what the body's basic needs are. We don't have a say in who we are attracted to, and nor do we have a choice in our need for other people. Yet, we unconsciously base our sense of self and self-worth on this automatic functioning. Any of the basic instinctual needs, sexual, social, or self-praise, evokes a wide network of emotional and mental associations that are useful in knowing how to meet those needs. When a stranger strikes up a conversation with us, we are rapidly able, or not, depending on your instinct stacking, to deduce a number of things about who they may be in relation to us, if they are friendly or a threat or some sense of their social role perhaps. These automatic associations are useful and necessary, but when we become identified with the instinctual drives, when it's just the instinctual drives, our consciousness can become run, as mine often is, right, by this automatic or this sort of, this automaticity of the instincts. And our emotions then become automatic, our thoughts become automatic, and we lose touch with our physical sensations unless something provokes us to give those sensations some attention. Without this kind of work, without playing this game, then our attention is often hijacked, and we experience, as our friend C.T. Nguyen would say, various forms of value capture. the compulsions of our instinctual drives have hijacked our attention. Our being, you could say, lacks initiative apart from the automatic patterns of the personality. We therefore are not masters of ourselves, but slaves, not even to instinctual agendas, but to the unconscious and delusional emotional and mental associations bound to these instincts. To be identified with the instinct is to give oneself wholly over to automatic associations, most of which never really reach the level of our cognition. Therefore, we might spend most of our lives lost in a sea of unconscious reactions, which is why we need to play the game, right? Unless we are present, we are going to be living from these kind of recycled impressions, which could degenerate into delusions and all sorts of other awful things over time. So understanding the instinctual drives might also help us, might help me anyway, and you, become aware of how we waste and siphon away the energy of our consciousness through excessive preoccupation with whatever our dominant instinct is. We might leak the energy of that instinct that ought naturally to be reserved for consciousness itself, and understanding the instincts in this way can then maybe help us to see what is possible beyond this sort of automatic quality of consciousness. Almost everything we do without presence constitutes a way that we leak energy, you could say, through the instinctual drives. We react to all of the instincts, right? Through the emotional center, with complaint, in the intellectual center, with fantasy, in the body center, by directing aggression towards others who have, subverted or impinged on our attempts to meet our instinctual needs and goals. There are many, many ways in which we leak energy through our instinctual drives. This whole video has been just leakage all the way through. Excessive eating, excessive worry, excessively long YouTube videos could be, part of the self-preservation instinct leakage. Vanity, excessive sexual activity, obsessiveness, recklessness in displaying one's flavor are just the few ways that, the sexual instinct leaks. And excessive reactions to other people's behaviors or perceptions, excessive talking, over-adapting oneself to others' expectations might be ways that the leaks of the social instinct are felt. Instinct is always obedient to something. It's always obedient to something, right? These are energies that support the life of the body and the consciousness that reside within it or the ego cage. Ego cannot change ego. A new master, right, the so-called real I, has to emerge, and the instincts will only obey this inner master. In the tension between our instinctual nature and essence, a new possibility may or may not arise that is more intelligent and inclusive than the perspective that produced the sense of polarity in the first place. So a third, essentially, right? The animal and the angel can find the right relationship. An inner life can cooperate with an outer life, and we can become a human being, as it were, without quotation marks, to quote old Gurdjieff. So there you go, buddy. That's the yak and that's the yap. I am going to now also send you a couple of my own thoughts on this, and then we'll talk some more, okay?
If I could fuck a mountain, oh Lord, I would fuck a mountain, and I'd do it with a woman in the greenhouse. Well, if she lives in the greenhouse, and if she lives in the greenhouse, oh, the mighty greenhouse of the sun. Yes, if she lives there quietly,
and goes to bed the nightly, while the tower ever, what is it? Peaks in the sky. Well, she comes tumbling to me. It seems that every night she's there for me. How I love her.